Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to a discussion advocating at municipal level virtual burden. My name is Paulius Godvadas. I will be humbly moderating this discussion, and please welcome our panel. So please welcome please welcome Ieva Petronytė, assistant professor at Vilnius University.
Hello, everyone.
Also, please welcome Gintaras Ramašauskas, Klaipėda Association of Local Communities.
Hi, everybody.
Also, give a very warm welcome to Harald Koht, professor emeritus at Oslo Metropolitan University. Harald, your microphone.
Okay, well, welcome all, and I look forward to take part in this session.
And also, please give a very warm welcome to Lene Haug, leader of Safe Ullevål Hospital.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this.
Okay, and this discussion will be organized in a kind of a very organized manner. So we will be having short presentations, during which and after which, of course, there are questions, and we agreed with panelists that there may be remarks to each other, so to make a discussion lively. So, Ieva, can I start with you and your presentation on opportunities and also difficulties of advocation in Lithuania?
Yes, of course. Thank you for giving me a word, and I'm starting to share my slides. I hope it's visible, right? Okay, thank you. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and I'm very happy to take part in this discussion, which Open Lithuanian Fund is organizing, and I think it's really useful and interesting. And as I said, I am happy to participate here. So I was given a task to give introduction, a small introduction about the situation in Lithuania regarding the advocacy at the municipal level. And I will try to do that as short as possible, and nevertheless taking the general features and trying to touch the different problems or the different aspects we are talking about in this sphere lately. So I'm already starting, and first of all, I just want to say a few words about the situation, about the existing instruments, and what we actually as citizens can do at our municipalities, and how are we welcomed to participate in the decision making regarding all these legal documents. So basically, the short thesis here can be that actually our legal basis is really favorable, and the Constitution as well as different laws are giving a background, giving a ground for citizens' inclusion, and also, for example, strategic document like our national program Lithuania to 2030 and others, also using these concepts of open government, of good governance, and things like that. And we are actually at the documents level very inclusive. I can say that. However, it's only one side of it's just on one side. It's always a second one, right? So so we have this, besides this legal documentation, we also have this norm that which exists in society and as well in the civil servants minds, which means that the cooperation between citizens or NGOs and municipality or government institutions are seen as needed. And both citizens and both civil servants say that, so that cooperation should be. So I have, for example, some survey results, and there is like more than 80 or 90% of respondents said this in both representative societies and representative civil servants surveys. So we really have a norm that participation should be, and we have a legal basis. However, we have also, I listed here, for example, 3 instruments which can be seen at local level, like local population surveys, like local NGO councils, and e-democracy, which was also implemented at all Lithuanian 60 municipalities. But all these things really present only one side. So on the other side, we have a practice. And what we have in practice is a little bit different. So for example, if you ask people what we feel, you rarely get an answer that everything okay and the positiveness comes out of this inclusion. So most of them, if you see this here up on the right corner, so a lot of people think that if you pay attention, the government doesn't pay attention to citizens' proposals. And most times, really, government just imitates, for example, or just takes proposals, but this comes to nothing, and no feedback is seen, and people feel frustrated. So that's interesting that this perception that government doesn't pay attention to citizen proposals is also seen between the same civil servants, which means that it's not just impression, right, of the citizens, but it has a background, a real background in practice, and this is a problem. So we have a little bit better, more positive view from civil servants, but mostly it is still a negative view. And here I listed also few practical examples, just to have an impression. For example, Ministry of Interior, in their annual reports, they have these numbers of citizens' participation rate and proportion of the population involved in local public affairs. And for example, here we see that part of the population involved in local public affairs is a little bit rising. And in last year, it was 38% of the population, which seems like, I would say that, okay, in Lithuanian context, it seems a lot. Having all other knowledge in mind. However, if you look behind these numbers, it's actually what here is counted mostly. The biggest part of this 38 involvement consists involvement in the communities activities, just any community activities. It doesn't mean this participation in the decision making or involvement, for example, and saying the opinion in the social networks like Facebook. So basically, it's okay. I mean, like, it's a positive thing that people are discussing and participating in the community life, but it's not advocating the need. But sometimes these numbers got shown as this involvement. So if you look to other sides, for example, if you see we have this instrument of local population surveys, which can be implemented by municipalities to ask people to participate in the survey and to express the opinion on one or another question. However, these surveys in the municipalities, first, are rare. The second, their participation in them are low. And even if they are taking part, so the results are rarely taken into account, and mostly, I mean, like, legally, we have this characteristic of a recommendation, and sometimes even when huge numbers of population are participating in saying, for example, critical position, it still doesn't get a response from a municipality council or other institution, or mayor, and this means that sometimes it just leads to frustration. So if you turn to democracy and opportunities for people to participate there, so I see this results of democracy maybe for 10 years, for 6, 7. So and we see that in all these 7 years, it doesn't change a lot. So this democracy basically is just a section in municipalities' side, but it doesn't have an activity. So rarely, in some, I'm talking about the tendencies. There are like exceptional municipalities, and some municipalities are really making great, but most of them are, I would say, that reserved using this democracy thing. And for example, we have this Jurgio Kepurė project from the Transparency International Lithuanian chapter, which sometimes are comparing all the 60 municipalities, and what we see, we have a small part on citizens' involvement, so that really, and at this point, our municipality is not really using democracy opportunities for advocating meaningfully, for advocacy meaningfully, to offering, which this instrument can offer for advocacy, so it's not used because municipalities sometimes just failing to give the information or give the information on time, or to make it visible or easy accessible for people and things like that. So and sometimes it's not given at all information. And last thing I would like to take your attention is local NGO councils, which is relatively new things. These councils are intended to be like arenas where civil society, the NGOs, and municipality are meeting. Both representatives from both sides come together and discuss the questions which are relevant to non-governmental organizations, or civil society organizations, and municipality as well. And what we see, however, that we have very new or very recent data that my colleague was looking through the documents about these NGO councils. And actually what we see is not really encouraging, because most of these councils, for example, in 1/3 of the municipalities, there are no information about these NGO councils at all. So we can imagine that people, what local citizens are even do not know that these councils exist. In health councils, in health municipalities, there are information about councils, but basically it's just about the composition of the local council and the regulation, and that's all. So it's also not very helpful. And also only small part has, for example, the protocols visible, but these protocols about the meetings which were already organized, it's really not really helpful also, because in these protocols, basically what is seen, it's just normally it's just one protocol of the first meeting where a chairman was elected, and that's all. So election of the chairman, maybe guidelines for activity of the council, and that's all you can see in most of the municipalities. Even you can see that these councils are doing something. And there are only few, maybe 5 or something municipalities there really you can see that their meeting held, and that questions which are like relevant and useful for citizens are discussed. So basically, we have really we have a problem with the implementation of the its mechanisms the law give us, and we search then for reasons why it is this, why it is such, and what our different research pays attention to is basically 3 sources of obstacles which we can see. So first 2 are related to the motivation and skills of these 2 sides, municipality representatives and civil society representatives, including NGO. And the third one is flows from these first 2 and gets its name about, well, it's about a mutual distrust. And actually, if this atmosphere of mutual distrust is really pervasive, and you can see that in most, again, not all, but in most municipalities, and I would say it's a main problem, because the first 2 things, motivation and skills, we can be changed, but hardly, especially when you think about the opinion and attitudes of the citizens, especially because we see that people do not see sense in participating. We see that, okay, my participation doesn't change anything, and I don't want to spend my time because it doesn't mean nothing. There's a lot of negative impression also, because when we see that we also had one survey where we asked people, again, how you do you think that the municipality or government institution broadly are taking, are respecting people's advices or proposals, and the answers were but not so many. But when we look at the answers of only those people who actually participated, then the answers are a little more positive. So it means that that this impression is worse than the situation sometimes. So the situation is not good again. So we saw a little bit, but the impression and this how to say that allegiance of the cities or the municipalities, right? So they're really uncomfortable, and people and disencouraging from further involvement. So when we talk about the civil servants, so again, so there's a lot of we don't see a lot of purpose to include or involve citizens. We sometimes even see, for example, non-governmental institutions more as competitors than as partners. And so at least civil society organizations feel that we are seen and met more as competitors than partners. Also, there's a lack of knowledge about the NGO sector, for example, among civil servants, and this situation is a little bit changing. It's getting a little bit better. However, there's still we have quite low voluntary numbers in Lithuania and in civil society organizations. That means that the civil servants, we are just people as like normal Lithuanian society, and most of them are not involved in any activities organized by civil society organizations. That means we do not know exactly how these organizations are working, about the specific, and this leads to a lot of misinterpretation or miscommunication between organizations and municipalities when it comes to advocacy. So this means that just it's a lot of stereotyping and from both sides, and less knowledge from both sides, and not so many skills talking about from a civil society organization, for example, to participate. We do not know exactly how to do that, whom to address, and things like that. Talking from civil servants, this sometimes lacks these skills to involve, to present the information in good, in readable, for example, manner, or to invite people, like in the manner people really get the invitation, and it's not just a post in somewhere in municipality site where nobody can see it. So all these little things which comes to combines and just leads to not unsuccessful examples of involvement. And these unsuccessful examples, we are just getting stereotyped, communicated among citizens, and sometimes just lead to this mutual distrust. So this sometimes it's it can be all even see as a vicious circle, because it's just really hard to climb out of that, and you need either initiative in the civil society, or the initiative, like strong initiatives from the organization to get involved in the advocacy, or the initiative from civil servants. But it has their costs, and really people sometimes are tired and don't see there's like the new impulse should come. But this new impulse, it's really coming sometimes, and this is mostly these municipalities with a good examples of cooperation. So sometimes these depends. The success depends on the very specific persons. That means that if there is a specific person in the municipality's administration, and this person can involve and invite people or have good qualities for that, so okay, the cooperation begins. But if not, it doesn't start. And even if then it all depends only on the specific persons. So you can imagine it's not very long-term cooperation then, and of course to still maintain something that is achieved, it's easier than to start new things. But sometimes maybe not. So a lot of things can be, a lot of examples can be mentioned, but also it's then some people, for example, if a person just setbacks from the municipality administration and all the contacts get out with them, so sometimes the advocacy just ends there. So because it comes new persons, they don't see relevance in public involvement, and you can see this again, that you have to, as a civil society organization, to show your potential, to show your pluses, to show that you really can be a good partner. And some organizations, you say, okay, enough. So I did that once, I did it twice. I don't want to make that 10th or 12th time, and we can do that themselves. So some organizations, don't need the cooperation. So this mutual distrust problem is basically, I would say, that the most important one, and I really look forward for our Norwegian colleagues, maybe examples, or what your advices, or just your knowledge about maybe how to change these soft things, because it's a little bit easier, right, to change the legal documents. But with legal documents, we are quite okay at Lithuania. But the most problem, the main problem comes from this distrust, mutual distrust between municipality and civil society. So with little steps which can really get things together, right, and to encourage advocacy and to encourage a cooperation, so which would be very useful. And maybe sometimes we need just a fresh view from outside to see things which we even don't see anymore, because getting in this vicious cycle again and again.
Ieva, I am sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, so I have to
take care about time.
Okay, so just I don't see my clock is a little bit under this presentation, so I don't see. Okay, so basically, I just this said could be skipped. A pandemic, right? It could actually it could be a possibility and the window of opportunity for the cooperation between civil society and municipalities, right? Because there was a lot of challenges, a lot of new, unexpected, and unprecedented situations. There, of course, there was a possibility to choose between some authoritative governing and also being possibility to join forces. So what we see, we don't have systemic data yet about this advocating at this level, but what we see is path dependency, right? So actually it didn't change a lot. So the municipalities which had the cooperation and like advocacy, stronger advocacy of civil society organizations, they continue to do that. The networks are stronger, and for example, you can see some good partnership between municipality, civil society organizations, and business. And from the other side, you look at the most of the municipalities where even if civil society was bloomed with a lot of initiative, then taking the solutions for pandemic, making something, right, and trying to help municipalities to deal with this unprecedented situation. Actually, the advocacy didn't get more forward. So it was mostly just small and short time cooperation, which didn't, at least in the first wave. And we have more data, it doesn't go further, but we can see maybe it's still have some possibilities here. Okay, so I will make here my main thesis, right? That we have this good situation, quite good situation at the documental level, but however, everyday life practice show that advocacy is still a burden from a municipality, and a lot of civil society organizations and citizens doesn't get involved in it, thought they could or they would like to. So I will end here for now and give the floor to my colleagues. Thank you.
Ieva, thank you very, very much. May I end your presentation with a question?
Yes, of course.
I very much like your last statement, and I was wondering, to your expertise, what would you say a burden is for citizens, and what would you say a burden is for, say, local governments? What is exactly the burden as it is felt for citizens, and what is the burden for local governments?
So the burden, so what is perceived as burden, right? So for a local government, it is more time needed, more you have to involve, you have to make extra steps, right? To involve people, to know, for example, who to invite, right? Because sometimes it's even at this level we have problems, and even if a municipality wants to consult, for example, with civil society, we are involving some or inviting some organizations, but not other, because there is not so many. A lot of the municipalities even don't have lists of the civil society organizations in their municipality. So if you don't have a list, for example, so the invitations are very selective, and sometimes if the organization with the municipalities want, so they invite only those which are like comfortable partners, or which are not criticizing. They're just like easy to cooperate, and this also bears it's a burden for equality then, right? So for a municipality, you can imagine all these organizational burdens, the land, the extra steps you have to take, and so on. And for the civil society organizations, they are also a burden as well, because if the organizations are in participating, they they expect something back, right? They expect something. If we don't expect that their opinion is, or their statement or proposal will be accepted, okay, but normally all organizations are expecting that, right? So we are expecting at least that the reasons why it is not accepted would be clear. And this is not the case. There are a lot of situations where, for example, municipalities we are just getting this, there's a lot of discussion, and these proposals are discussed, there are pluses, minuses, and so on, for example, some committees or some this processes, but then suddenly in one or another way it gets refused, and nothing, and nobody explains why. And the organizations which really oftenly do not do that on voluntary basis, so we don't want to expect to pay a lot of their forces to bring a lot of energy to that if if you don't accept it will be paid attention to, or all these things you said will really at least like openly or transparent accepted. And I'm not imposing that there is some untransparent things here. Sometimes, yes, sometimes could be some interest from municipality members and so on, but there's a lot of the factor is also just administrative or organizational also, when people are just not given a feedback and sometimes out of for example motivation or not know, sometimes not knowing that like we have to make a feedback, we have to give us feedback, and yeah, so it's I'm sorry, I'm just talking too long.
Thank you very much. It's a very clear answer. Okay, and I will be giving a floor now to Gintaras Ramašauskas. I think you, Gintaras, have a very first-hand kind of experience in what we just talked. So please welcome Gintaras Ramašauskas.
Hello again, and well, I'm not going to repeat what Ieva said, but advocacy is one of the tools for civic engagement. In order to be efficient, the tools and approaches must be used by experienced and well-trained person or organization. And therefore, when talking advocacy, I want to talk more about education. And we need to define clearly who is to be trained to act as a democracy watch dogs or guard dogs, able to use all tools available at its full potential and with maximum effect. And we all agree to think and plan global, but act locally. And then we fail too often on that local level, because thinking and planning means many words and talking, and acting local and getting satisfactory result means daily work and hard work to be done. And that work is done not by names of organizations, but by actual people living in the actual neighborhoods. So when we discuss local civic engagement and advocacy included, we used to repeat that NGO sector must do that, but that means everybody has to do the job, and everybody usually is nobody. We have NGO register in Lithuania, in which all kind of NGOs are registered, and are like enormous variety of fish in the ocean. Picture is very segmented, but every kind of fish in the ocean have their specific roles in the ecosystem, and so does NGOs. They are not all the same. Therefore, I suggest to have a separate register of civic society NGOs, held separately from chess clubs, from sports, hobbies, religious organizations, and others, if they don't want to be involved into civic engagement, which is hard and persistent work, as I'm trying to say here. So next step, all democracy education must be addressed not to the whole NGO sector, as it is happening at the moment. Everybody responsible means nobody is responsible, but to the task force of civic engagement, to civic society NGOs only. And therefore, cooperation with funds and so on, with all kind of international participation in international programs should be more focused on civic society NGOs, more than it is at present. Being a local community activist, I urge to pay more attention to the local communities, as they are organized by territorial principle and represent their own neighborhoods with real people living there. And that is where strength of local community organization is. Remember, act locally. And in my opinion, strong local community organizations united into umbrella organizations on city or region level, as well as on national level, is the easiest and the most straightforward way to create the so necessary for Lithuania critical mass of active citizens who are interested in participation on non-political but still civic level, aimed at local and central government monitoring, decision-making, anti-corruption, sustainable development, and territorial planning, ecology and heritage preservation, healthy economical climate, and other forms of civic engagement in all segments of life. Local communities are already organized as one of the possible actors of or even as leaders of civic engagement. They are all registered as association on a neighborhood level. All local communities are free to join city or regional association of communities, and there is already a union of community organizations of Lithuania called in Lithuanian transcription LVBOS, with about 1,500 member organizations, and that is big for Lithuania. You take my word for that. Involvement into advocacy actions on a local community level should be very much appreciated, but definitely not all communities have enough resource, don't have knowledge and people able to do this kind of job, or even to build or even will to engage with local governments, as it takes enormous amount of time and ties up the capital too. Therefore, city or regional umbrella organizations, city or region community associations, as well as national community union should be considered as main partners of democratic state, in my opinion. Think global, act local. And one more point, as one of the positive effects of the pandemic situation, what Ieva has mentioned, I can tell you one thing. We have local governments becoming more open to the citizens, and that's very good move. I mean, now we can watch live YouTube sessions of city council meetings or meetings of committees, commissions, where actual council work is done. We can see how decisions are discussed and formulated and how they are made, voted for, and that is great. It's a first-hand source of information for a person interested in decision-making on local level, therefore is important. In my city, Klaipėda, we have almost 150,000 inhabitants. And please make your guess how many people are watching live council committee meetings. If you have some figures in your head, so here is my answer. About 50 viewers only on average. Later, within a week or so, the number of viewers will go up to about 140 views on average, plus or minus some. Okay? So imagine only 0.09% of city inhabitants are interested in how important decisions are made in their city. I think it's very bad result. And as Ieva said, that participation rate is about 49%, 50%. I guess it is only participation in the political vote, in the elections, not real participation on street level, let's say, okay? Such low interest in civic activity level should be the main target of civic society NGOs. And creating the critical mass of interested and active people, that is our main goal in Lithuania at the moment. So critical mass is keywords now when we are talking about democracy. Simple as that. Civitas, a civic society institute in Vilnius, are making regular surveys of civic activism in Lithuania. And conclusions are rather sad. As I read from their last or 2-year-old reports, only from 5 to 7% of our population is willing to participate. And that is including all kinds of voluntary work or actions or signing at least one electronic petition once a year. It's too little. It's not really enough. Such low level of activism, followed by very poor statistics of participation in political elections, requires immediate attention and very well organized tools and actions. So, next, keywords for further discussions. I would like to propose tools and actions. Therefore, personally, I will be looking for answers to the following questions in today's discussion, and therefore that's why my presentation is so open-ended. So question number 1, who is to be trained as a democracy watchdogs, being the daily work of civic engagement? Second question, who are the trainers or teachers? And then, what participation tools are most effective in pandemic or post-pandemic society? And last question, what results to be expected? So, thank you for attention.
Thank you, Gintarai. Thank you very much. I also have a question for you. What would you say, to your expertise, what would help to build that critical mass?
As I said in my speech, that probably it is education programs addressed to those few people at the community level who show interest to take care about their close environment. We have to stop talking about the whole country or about the whole European Union. Things are happening local level. That's my suggestions, where we have to look for answers.
Okay, so it is as if the focus should be really in local communities. That's where we need to find the critical mass. Then we can go further. But first,
and as far as education, as I understand, education of democracy, let's call it, okay? So it's well, nobody is born with the skills and knowledge where to find necessary information about city planning, or where to find norms of pollution, where to go and where to write letter if you see something is going on not the right way in your environment. If you are suspicious or even you are sure that projects in infrastructure projects, after the tender, immediately after the tender, their costs start growing fourfold, which is nuisance. So something is wrong with tenders or something is wrong with pricing. So citizens have right to ask the questions, but they have to know how to formulate that question, where to address it. They have to know when answer from institutions has to come. And it's all practical training of participation and democracy is absolutely necessary to start with lowest, at the lowest end of society. I mean, local community, because family is something different, okay? Last grades of in the school, their main interest is good result of exam and their further career. Students, they are busy with something else, okay? But local community will always find few people interested in what is going on in their neighborhood.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Gintaras, once again. And I'm giving a floor now to Harald Koht, please. Harald, your microphone.
I should be on, and I should be able to share screen with my presentation, where it's just moved over here. Very good. Can you all see it?
Yes.
I should be able to do this. Okay. The organizers have asked the important question about advocating at the municipal level, and what are the virtues or benefits of such participation. And we already had heard two interesting discussions. And I just want to remind you of the questions raised by from ACF Lithuania. What is the benefit and meaning for active cooperation between local government and local communities? What good does it bring? What purposes does it serve? And how do we get to the current level and engagement? These are difficult and large questions to answer in 15 minutes, but I'll do my best based on data from surveys of Norwegian neighborhood clubs throughout the period of 30 years. So we have some experience trying to find proper answers to this type of questions. First of all, what are the burdens? I think there are several barriers to participation, and some have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, but there are additional ones that we have to be realistic about when we talk about citizen participation at the local level. Modern urban planning is complicated, and I will show you data to illustrate that. Another thing is that when you take part in, especially in planning decisions, outcomes are not self-evident, but often unclear and unpredictable. There are many plans that are never realized or end up quite different from what we expected. And the third problem is that citizen groups may themselves become part of bureaucracy and maybe lose sight of what they are really interested in. And fourth, the participation risks becoming elitist, that because those who participate themselves are an elite compared to the people who work on the ground level. But there are, of course, beneficial sides to participation too, maybe not so easy to prove, but quite important. But they also require some rules or types of education that Gintaras suggested. For example, a realization that it might be necessary to give priority to engaging in the early stages of an urban planning process, and thereby more effectively influence decision-making and perhaps prevent undesirable ideas. Typical examples are from my own neighborhood, when in the general 10-year plan was suggested that the large part of the neighborhood should be raised to be replaced by not single family dwelling houses, but by apartment blocks. But we had a local campaign and were able to convince the authorities to retract the plan. Participation allows community groups to make initiatives and influence the course of events. Well, of course, that's the whole point of participating. And we also see that participation provides training in seeing local problems in a wider context. This is one of the more controversial issues, and many regard local participants as NIMBY, that they only ask to be taken outside important issues, not in my backyard, but you organize local participation well, it will increase respect for wider issues such as housing, the service of minorities, and not least safekeeping of the environment. And if you are really advanced in participation, it may involve actual delegation of power and influence to people in the local community. Here, to back up some of these points by data, especially the first question or argument is that urban planning is complicated. Here is a table taken from several surveys of participation by neighborhood clubs in local planning. This graph can be read in different ways. First of all, you will see the number of different fields of activities, which are mandated by either by national law or by local regulations. And these are areas there that NGOs and neighborhood clubs in particular are invited to participate and express their opinion. What we can see here, first of all, is the number of areas, as I mentioned. You can also see that there has been a certain decline in participation from a height around 97, 2003, and a gradual decline in participation rates by neighborhood clubs in local planning issues such as traffic plans, zoning plans, roads, citywide long-term planning, and also local plans like transportation plans, which concern public transportation mostly, and also in the more detailed plans on the sort of very local level. On the other hand, you can also see that in 91, most of the participation was focused on traffic plans and zoning and citywide plans, but there are now new areas of activity such as parks and recreation and area plans. So there have been more opportunities to participate, and of course an increased burden on local clubs on where to focus their attention. So that might be one reason for the relative decline in participation in planning. But still, the activity is quite high, and you can see that in some areas of planning, such as traffic and traffic safety, still about 40% of clubs that in a given year participate in discussions. But this table is quite complicated, and it might be worth studying also after our meeting. The second point I made was that outcomes are not self-evident, but often unclear and unpredictable. I think our first speaker, Eva, also touched this point, that documents might appear unclear, inaccessible, and especially on the long term, they often appear as good lists for wishes rather than firm commitments. We often see that the tools for implementation plans are weak or non-existent. Beautiful plans on paper, but have little connection with budgets or funding. And other thing that long-range plans can always be challenged and renegotiated. So there can be also here a question of whether to spend too much time on effort on plans that may never get to be realized. My third point regarded that citizens groups might themselves be co-opted or enmeshed in the established bureaucracy. One reason for that is that planning procedures are pretty clear to decision makers and bureaucrats, but for citizen groups, they are not clear at all. This have some evidence from research in my local neighborhood that local clubs will often continue to fight on issues that have already been decided on the highest political level, even when developers already have received permissions to start work. And that's, of course, also a waste of time and effort. Then, of course, this is a classic issue for students of politics. It's how participators themselves risk become a part of the elite. There are several reasons for that. That a lot of issues to be decided on the local level requires long-term involvement from people who only can work on issues on part-time, since they are, after all, at work or at school. And second, that community groups are themselves organized so that just a few people are continually involved and communicate with local government elites. And it's difficult and a challenge for everyone to keep broad groups mobilized over time. My organization, the Norwegian Neighborhood Association, is involved now in a project in Kaunas, and we will see how they will be able to maintain interest and involvement of people over time. So, what are then the virtues or benefits of citizen participation? Here I can report from our Norwegian studies that the satisfaction rate among neighborhood clubs is fairly high, depending on the issue. Unfortunately, I have not yet the newest data for this. We are just now analyzing data from a new survey among neighborhood clubs carried out last year, but we don't have all the numbers fixed yet. So the last figures I have are from 2007, where 44% of neighborhood clubs were happy about their participation in transportation issues, and 76%, which is very high, were happy with their participation on city-wide long-range planning. One reason for this difference might be that citywide planning is very long range and it's easier for authorities to accommodate viewpoints from interest groups and citizen groups than when you have plans that are very close in time to being implemented. And here my final graph here, and it's also it's not my final graph, it's second to last, is a table from our most recent survey in the Norwegian Neighborhood Federation. regarding planning issues, local planning issues. And we asked the neighborhood clubs to indicate whether they took part as a result of the initiative of the government, by developers, or by their own initiative. And what we can see from the table here, or the graph here, is that the clubs claim, more or less truthfully, I'm not quite sure, but at least they claim that to a large extent, they themselves take the initiative in taking part in each of these issues. They are most active in very local issues like the planning of roads and streets. 84% claim to have taken the initiative in these cases, and also on issues regarding parks and recreation areas in the immediate neighborhood, and also on issues on traffic safety. And they are least likely to take the initiative regarding transportation plans and city-wide long-term planning. But still, more than half claim that they are taking the initiative in these plans. Of course, the city might claim that they have taken initiative because they have put out advertisements or invitations to participate, but it's up to the neighborhood club to initiate the process. Okay, so I hope we'll have more precise details about this in our report prepared later this year. Then our host for this meeting asked a big question about the importance of trust, and the previous speakers have already touched upon that. We have survey data that do not indicate exactly the level of trust, but I think a good indicator. We have asked the neighborhood clubs about their satisfaction with their cooperation with local government, starting in 91. And from 91 to 97, we can see an increase up to a very high rate that 82.4% of the clubs were happy with their cooperation with local government. From then, there has been a slight but clear decline from year to year until 2019, when just 58% of the neighborhood clubs express that they're happy with their cooperation with the local government, while the number who says they're unhappy or that there have been no cooperation at all has increased from 19 to 42. So this is a very worrying development in my view. How to explain it? I think in the early 90s, there was a very strong initiative on the part of the government to encourage cooperation between the local government and NGOs, but that has somewhat declined in actual practice in recent years. Also, other groups like developers have become quite powerful. Well, that was the last graph I wanted to show you. So, thank you very much. And here's my reference.
Okay, thank you, Harald, very much. And I now give the floor to Lene Haug.
Yes, I'll try to share my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, and yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you for interesting from the people that spoke before me. I'm the leader of the Save Ullevål Hospital organization in Oslo, and actually now I'm just in the middle of important decision making. This case is to be in the parliament tomorrow, and also the planning of the city, the planning authority of the city of Oslo, it has been taking an important decision today. So that's why I've been a little bit disturbed, because I have some journalists waiting for me when we are speaking. But I am, this organization started in 2018, and as Harald here said, maybe we start a little bit too late, because important decisions had already been made in 2016. And I'm not really experienced like you are in these things in theory. It's more like I'm doing this practically, and I'm untrained, so I think I have been training myself and maybe some others as well. So I actually want to talk more about what we have done and why we did it. But I also try to come into some of the subjects that you have been discussing, because my presentation is a bit different from yours. So this is the hospital that we are wanting to save. It's an old hospital, and it's in the middle of the center of Oslo. It's the largest hospital for acute treatment of bad illness and injuries in Norway, but it's not an individual hospital, because it's part of a larger hospital called Oslo University Hospital. That was the result of a large merge of 4 big hospitals in 2009 that made this Oslo University Hospital into actually the largest hospital in Europe and the 5th largest hospital in the world. And that's a bit strange for Oslo and Norway to have such a large hospital. But this means that Ullevål is a hospital that we want to save is no longer self-governed. So, and this has been a huge problem. The merge of these hospitals was not successful, and it didn't pay off. It was supposed to be very efficient, save a lot of money, and it didn't. So they are now trying to build themselves out of this crisis and to make this merge more successful. The picture that you saw here was from 2019, when something like, we don't know exactly, but maybe 3,000 people were surrounding this hospital to save. And this is people from Oslo. It's not so easy to get them out to do things like that, but this hospital means a lot for to the people. And one reason I think you might remember when the terror struck Norway in 2011. 77 people were killed by the bomb in our government in Oslo city, and by the same killer that went to the summer camp for children and shot people there. And this hospital had the most badly injured people coming all over. You remember Oslo was bombed, So it was crisis in our center, and kids were coming in. And the excellent trauma team at Ullevål Hospital, they saved 31 of 32 of the victims that came in there. Without the extending work of this trauma team, there would have been a lot more victims. That's probably obvious. And they also achieved international praise for the work they did, how fast they were able to act, and how many lives they were able to save at that time. And this extremely professional medical expertise environment would be destroyed by the plans of destroying this hospital. It will not be continued. And I think that is one of the reasons for the extreme amount of engagement amongst people of Oslo to save this hospital. And it's also a part of our history. It has been in the city for a long time, and it started as a way of handling epidemics, which is interesting now. In the late 1850s, the population of Oslo grew enormously from 30,000 in 1850 to 230,000 in 1887, and living conditions were bad, and a lot of infectious diseases were growing up, with cholera and scarlet fever and things like that due to bad hygienic conditions. And that was the reason for Ullevål Hospital to be built. And as you see on the picture there, they built the hospital to keep the patients away from each other, with a lot of space and air, to prevent the infectious diseases to flourish. And later that wasn't so important anymore, but during the pandemics, this hospital with this large capacity, and also its building that are spread around, has been very important during the COVID-19 situation. What they are planning is up in their right-hand corner. They are planning to build on a very small area, very cramped buildings, high-rise buildings, and a lot of people are not so very happy about that. They think it's not good for infectious diseases, and it also is a problem that it has will not have good enough capacity. So, and what we see is that capacity is very important during special times. So, and a little bit like the previous speakers have been saying, this is a complicated case. It's difficult to teach people about it, because it's not like they will leave Oslo without a hospital, but they will leave us with a pure, not as good hospitals as we have. And the amount of documents and papers and things to read is enormous. And the people that are planning these new hospitals have been doing it for 10 years. And there have been different plans. So I was just showing some of the plans that they have delivered, and they change. And once you learn to know one plan, then they change that plan, and then you have to read another plan, and they are like, they have 2,000 pages of documents, and almost no one reads them, of course, and they don't even read them themselves. And this is one of the plans, and the plan was then to have all the 4 hospitals in the Oslo University Hospital built at the same location. This wasn't possible because of traffic and things, so they had to leave that plan. and they sort of end up with a plan with a really cramped area. But our problem is that the decision was made by the Minister of Health in June 2016. And at that time, it was almost unnoticed by the public and also by the politicians and the media. So they kind of made the decision quietly, and people were not, they did not know what was happening. And it was also difficult to understand that these plans are so bad. Only a handful of people, but really knowledgeable people working in the hospital did protest at that time. But obviously we should have started a little before. So we are actually trying to change a decision that is already made and probably are a burden to someone, and not very popular always. But I think the problem about this decision is that the health minister, he would just decide that without any democratic process involving anyone. Not even the people working at this hospital were involved in this decision, because the protests would have been huge at that time if people knew. So I think what we have to have another fight, but there are decisions, of course, made in the local authority, the city council in Oslo, in the government, and also in the parliament, and also in the boards of the hospital, and in the boards of the regional hospital company. So that we have really many decision makers that we have to try to get to. Yeah, and there is, of course, a lot of people that don't know so much about this case, that like the idea of a modern and new hospital. The Ullevål Hospital has some old buildings, and so a lot of people think that, okay, we can spend a lot of money, build something new. It seems okay. So it's also kind of ignorance or a lack of interest in a few people. But these plans are really bad. And they are so bad that this hospital employs 24,000 people, and almost everyone is against them. They don't want it. And because it's too expensive, and that's one reason. And it will not give us the capacity that we need. The medical solutions for how to organize it are not good. And there is also in these plans things that rely on huge efficiency, which is not actually, it's, yeah, I'm looking for the word, but it's not likely to happen. Yeah, so if this forced efficiency won't work, then the inhabitants of Oslo will not have the hospital capacity that it needs. So we have a lot of hospitals in Norway and in Oslo as well, but we need a lot of, it's a growing city and the neighborhood around are growing. But it's difficult to manage to get torchlight procession in Oslo. It's easy to have it in small parts of rural areas in the districts where they lose their one and only hospital. But I think we have been quite successful to communicate what it is about to the inhabitants, and been able to have a lot of people take to the street. Of course, the last year it has been difficult because of the pandemic, and since we are advocating hospitals and have a lot of hospital workers in our midst, we cannot do anything that would spread the virus. So we have to be extremely careful. So we have not been doing things like this during the pandemic. But what we have done is that we have been cooperating a lot with others and trying to build broad alliances all the way, also with neighborhood clubs and with historical society clubs, with people engaged in environmental things, and also with other movements for hospital or healthcare around all of Norway, having meetings with them and cooperate with them. And also all of the trade unions, the local trade unions, support this case. And a lot of professionals in different areas, being economics, architecture, medicine, law, or what we need. So we have a lot of engaged people that use a lot of time. This being said, this is totally voluntary work. No one gets paid for it. Everyone contributes and rather pay to participate. It's quite expensive to be part of this. So we I actually think that we might win this case, and therefore it's really engaging. It's difficult, but it's possible, and I'm optimistic. We have the majority in the city council that do not support the plans of the health minister. And on a survey made a year ago, 80% of the people of Oslo is against the plans. And the Agency for Plan and Building Service, which just came with their statement just today, they do not support the plans because they don't meet their standards. And in our parliament now, there is all the political parties except for the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are against the plans. Unfortunately, for the time being, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have the majority together, so they can see it through. But we have an election coming up in September, and I think this is going to be a large case in the election campaigning. A lot of the other parties will make this case an important issue during the election campaigning. And I think what we did, learning by doing, was that we were good at and are good at creating and maintaining alliances. And we have been trying to be a very reliable source on information and fact, and have produced a lot of reports on different aspects of the case, being it law, economic, architecture, medicine. And therefore we have been able to do a lot of lobbying. We have had new things all the way. We try to find new reasons to visit the politicians as often as we can, and try to find new angles for the media to keep the media interested. That's a difficult part, but media is important. The second large thing is that we have made an realistic alternative to the plans, which I think is really important. And we had a local election in 2019, and at that local election, before the election, we got all 9 political parties to promise the voters that they would go against these plans and save Ullevål Hospital. And we got them have a press conference before the election with everyone with this sign that says stop and turn around. And everyone that signed the declaration to promise to save Ullevål Hospital. And right after the election, they got these parties, political parties, got the majority in the city council. And the first thing we made sure happened was that they gathered once more and said that they would still promise to save the hospital. And we have made them do this on many occasions, so it's impossible for them to leave that. So even quite many of these parties has been against their national political parties in this issue, but they have been staying loyal to this case. And also we have a very good, close cooperation with employees at the hospital, and we are in. It's important for us to help them understand that this fight is not lost. So recently we have made a lot of buttons that the employees can wear at the hospital. Their leaders aren't happy about that, but the employees are really happy about that. So we have distributed thousands of this, and the people at the hospital are wearing them. And also we have an underground newspaper, which is really kind of controversial, that we distribute in the hospital, that to encourage the employees there, because they are sort of urged to stay silent from their leaders. So it's important for them to know that we're still there to fight with them. And artists, like you see here, Vanessa Beard, which is a quite famous international artist. She's drawing a lot of drawing for us, and I think that is keeping the engagement up. And also, since Oslo is the capital of Norway, and the parliament is involved, it's important to be advocating this case in the northern all parts of Norway. So we have teamed up with this woman in the national costume up in left here, which is really known for fighting for local hospitals and the birth facilities in smaller places. So she supports our fight, and we support her. So yeah. And I don't know how much time, but the last thing I will talk about is that we made this alternative that we called the Park Sykehuset, the Park Hospital, Ullevål, to show how this area could be developed to a modern hospital with new and old buildings at a lower cost. And we had some of the best medical professionals in Norway, and also some of the best hospital architects making this alternative report that has been really important, and that is important for the politicians that oppose the decision, that they have this alternative to talk about and say that we could do this instead. So I think that we made this clear alternative that we want to be looking at is one of the reasons that we could do this. And the alternative could save as much as 2 billion euro, which is very important since the funding are not endless for healthcare. And it will keep the trauma team together, and yeah, it will be a better alternative for the environment, since we are keeping functional buildings that are already there. And to me, the most important thing is that it will give us enough capacity and space for the future and also for expansion, because I don't believe that all this forced efficiency will be successful. So we will need to have much more capacity in the future than they plan for. So yeah, this is a little bit another angle than your guys, but this is how we have been working with this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lene. There's a question to Harald and Mrs. Lene. In Lithuania, the politicians claim that they have all the resources and that they sort of know better what is needed. And generally that the citizens are deciding while voting. How would you comment that? And then while reading the question, I also thought that this is a very good question to actually finalize the whole discussion, and I would address it to all the panelists. If you could very quickly comment on that question, on that claim that the government or the local governments know better.
Yeah, when it comes to health politics, at least, this is a part of the politics that the local government and also the people in the parliament, when it comes to hospital, they don't know so much about it, because a lot of decisions are taking in due to our system are taking in the boards, and they don't tell too much about how the decisions are made. So I think it's really very important to have other people, and there are a lot of economists working there in these boards. That they are not medical expertise, no architects, no. So it's really very important to get other views to the politicians. And actually, I think with expertise in our group, we know better. I would say, yeah. So. But I understand that people think that, and a lot of people say that, but I mean, the authority, they know what they are doing. And my answer is actually no.
Thank you very much, Lene. Thank you very much. Harald, how would you comment that? Harald, your microphone. I think it's turned off.
Well, in a representative democracy like the Norwegian, we have to respect the final decisions are being made by the elected authorities. But up to those final decisions, I think this is very important, and it's a right of the people to use its freedom of expression to come forward with their opinions and their own solutions with regard to issues that concern them. So I think that's also a very important part of democracy. So I would say it's a failure of democracy when we have governments that do not respond to citizen activities. And especially I think on the local level that is very important, because it concerns the living conditions in a close environment for them. But of course, there are cases where individuals or groups might be not willing to see larger issues involved in making decisions. And that's why we have a system where elected bodies will have the final decisions. But as long as the final decisions have not been made, then all citizens should be invited to take part in discussion and be allowed to either individually or through an organization to promote their positions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gintarai, what about you? What would your comment be?
Well, first of all, special thanks to Lene, because she gave us an example of constructive participation when people had very clear goals and they made sort of networking with other organizations, and they were employing politicians to reach their goal. And also they came up with alternative solutions. That means constructive. Being constructive is not standing in the street all day long with a torch with the hand, or beating the drum and shouting your own truth. So as far as question about relationship with politicians on local level, if you imagine sort of a temperature graph as temperature of relationship of communities and civil society activists in my city with local government. So it will be very clearly expressed sinusoid, sort of wave going ups and downs into plus temperatures and minus temperatures. So just before elections, temperature is at very high levels because all politicians want to hear opinions of communities. Everybody wants to come and visit us. Everybody is willing to listen to all complaints and suggestions. And now when we have midterm between elections, suddenly we become more obstacle to local government because we are asking a lot of questions. We are coming up with our suggestions, which are probably in contrary with already made decisions. And we are giving a lot of work to them. And therefore, temperature at the moment is very down to minus. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much. And Ieva, if I may ask you also to have a very, very brief, but still your comment.
Yeah, so it's hard to say anything new when this remarks was made, but I'll try. But first of all, I just wanted to thank to say thank you for our presenters, to other presenters, because it was really interesting. Thank you, Gintarai, for Klaipėdos and the more broader community view to the problem. And Harald, I was really surprised that these levels of satisfaction are really getting lower in Norway. And actually, it was really a new tendency for me because, you know, like in Lithuania, we always look at the Scandinavia and the Norway as an example. And, you know, like we want to be in a situation like you are, and we always looking for some recipes, so how to get there. But seeing that, you know, like this is happening also in let me say that in your yard, it's also a little bit, you know, like making it uneasy and raising additional questions. But I know we don't have time here, but it really was surprising and interesting for me. And Lene, thank you also for a presentation. It was like very powerful example, and I'm happy to learn more about that. I hope you will be successful, really, and you know, like the goal will be achieved. And it was very useful, I think, and also for people who are looking at our discussion in Lithuania. This list what you did and what exactly things that you did in your experience, and also this process, how long process it is, because I saw even 2016 mentioned. So, and how long actually people are staying involved in the question, and how motivated they are, and how did they not get away from the question. So also it raised me questions about how institutions are reacting, but you said that, okay, so they are more positive at the moment, but it was time that they wasn't, maybe. So I don't know, so if Paulius will say if you have time for that or no. So but it would be, okay, no, but it would be like very interesting to hear. Okay, and talking about this last, so thank you, and getting to this last remarks. Yeah, so I think that very short. So the politics is a very broad sphere, right? So it's a lot of issues and a lot of problems politicians should deal with, and they can't be experts in all fields. And I think that in this, it's normal not to know anything, something, and some issues about some issues in some fields and some decisions. But it's shame not to know. But it is a shame not to ask for people who have a first-hand experience with experts by having a knowledge or having a lot of involvement in specific questions. So I would say that it's actually politicians should maybe change the mindset a little bit here and not to, as Gintaras said, not to get cold by people trying to say what to do, right? And not to be just listeners of the problems, but also be open for possible solutions and not to think at any time that we are an expert on all possible things. So I'm just putting this in this way. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And on my behalf, I also thank once again, I thank you, Ieva, thank you, Lene, thank you, Harald, and thank you, Gintaras, for your presentations and for this discussion. This discussion has been organized by Active Citizens Fund to encourage bilateral cooperation between Lithuania and the Nordic countries. Thank you very much on my behalf also. And I would like to finish by saying, be active citizens and take care about advocacy.
Thank you very much as well.
Thank you.
And thank you also for very interesting questions, Ieva. But I agree with Paulius, they are too big to be answered in this session. We'll have to come back to that later.
Okay.